My name is John Gathuku. I am married to Margaret. We have 3 children and we stay in Kikuyu, where I lead a team called Timazi Africa. And Timazi Africa is a student ministry that is an offshoot of the Trinity Fellowship, where I started my service in student ministry. And we focus mainly on teenagers, and we publish for teenagers, and our flagship publication is called Timazi Magazine, which serves the Christian unions in high schools, helping them respond to contemporary issues from a biblical perspective. I was in the university 22 years ago in JKUAT, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, and the close of, I think, my 4th year, I attended Commission 2000, and it is in Commission 2000 that I committed myself to ministry, and from then is when I was seconded, or I got to meet Trinity Fellowship through Commission 2000.
Yeah.
And then I joined them in the high school department.
22 years ago, you were exiting campus.
Well, I think that's 21. Sorry, not 22, 21. Yeah.
It was 2000. That's when you were at the end of your school.
Yes. Yes.
You took a 5-year course or a 4-year course?
Yeah.
Okay. And you've mentioned so many things now that I want to talk about, but we're getting there. Did you join campus a Christian?
No, I converted in my 3rd year.
Okay.
When one of my best friends who was in the University of Nairobi passed on, and he collapsed during registration. He was one of the most brilliant students I think we had from our constituency, and that death shook me to the core and caused me to ask some life questions that I had not yet reflected on deeply. And so as a 3rd year student, transitioning from 1st semester to 2nd semester, that death kind of brought me to a crisis, and I really reflected on how I had lived. And I repented of my sins, came back and kind of joined the Christian Union at the university.
So you were not in the CU between 1st and 2nd year?
Yes.
Yeah. And you encountered the CU a number of times then?
Incidentally, I did not even know that the Christian Union existed.
On campus?
On campus.
Yeah.
I was in the extreme side of
campus life.
Of campus life. I think the only instant I think we had a brush with the Christian Union is one day we were coming from a club, and we met with some Christian Union ladies who were coming from Acacia, and we had some exchanges that were not nice. Because later on now I got to meet them in the Christian Union, and we didn't know absolutely that actually the Christian Union existed. In fact, I remember when I entered the big hall, the assembly hall in Jomo Kenyatta University, and I saw how many students had filled that room. I wondered, what is this and what is happening? I think that was my first time to attend a Christian thing in the university.
Would you want to mention how being a CU member, even for those last 2 years of campus, changed your Christian life, early Christian life?
I think the Christian Union at the university truly played a significant role. I do remember that there was a gentleman called Gideon Odhiambo, who was our campus staff. And at first I thought actually he was, I used to imagine that he is a pastor or something, because he used to come every day to my room to check whether I have attended all the different meetings of the Christian Union and catch up on how I'm doing on my quiet time reading and reading of the Bible. And I think he played quite a big role in how I navigated and got to know about the Lord. He exposed me to resources. It is through him that I got to know about Focus. I got to come to the Focus library bookshop that I would rather say also played a big role in my formation, and even later on how in terms of how I express ministry is also a reflection of what I think really made an impact on me when I was a young believer. So even my ministry expression today has a very heavy reliance on Christian literature and its impact in the discipleship of students.
And you mentioned that one of your main ministry resources that you produce is a publication.
Yes, it's
magazine for teenagers in high school.
Yes.
And you mentioned, of course, you met Focus through the campus staff, Gideon of Yambo. I have encountered the name somewhere in the archives. I'm sure you would be glad to know that impact lives on even to date. So you attended Commission 2000, and you say that's where God called you to serve in Christian ministry?
Yes.
Yeah.
Commission 2000 was revolutionary for me in many ways. I got to interact with students from other universities, not only from the country but also from other countries. And also, the choice of speakers were quite on another level that I think I had not yet also interacted with. We had quite a number of international speakers like Peter Hammond, and I do recall the kind of impact the messages that left on us, leading us to a place of conviction to make a decision on how are we going to spend the rest of our lives. And in that particular conference, by the time I was leaving, I knew for sure I cannot live as if I did not hear. I think I'd been brought to the place of conviction that whatever else I was to do with life, it cannot again be as usual, as if I had never actually heard and listened to what God would have me do with life, and what is the role of a Christian. Yeah.
You've been now after Commission, and 2003 you start preaching on campuses, and you've done that for 18 years. What changes have you seen amongst the Christians on campus?
In 2003, I think is the first time I got an opportunity to preach at a university service. But immediately in 2001 is when I actually joined the student ministry, because Focus then did a number of follow-up meetings to all those who committed themselves during the Commission conference. And we did 2 meetings with then the President Dr. Oliver Kisaka, and I think Duncan Olumbe was also involved. So we met with them, they made connections, and at least ensured we had been given placement to the different ministries that had exhibited at the conference. And I actually ended up in the Trinity Fellowship. And so 2001, at the close of 2001, 2002, I received training from Trinity Fellowship. And since that time, if I look over the years, I would say that the Christian unions were largely evangelical with a leaning towards the Pentecostal kind of tradition of the church. And so there's a certain life and vibrancy that was in the Christian union, and again a certain maturity and sobriety that was really balanced in how the Christian union leaders and the services expressed themselves. That was very, very different from how an ordinary local church would be like. And I found that quite unique. Then again, I think we had the fact that most of the people who would speak in the Christian unions usually would be national leaders. And I think that has shifted a bit as there was an explosion of more universities coming. I think that kind of spread out and meant that now to serve all these different universities, the pulpit kind of expanded a bit. And in a sense, I think that also affected the kind of teaching and how would I describe that? I think that kind of shifted the outlook And even the kind of teaching that now you would expect at the university, that kind of shifted a bit because I think of the many more universities that increased. So that's something maybe I mourn, and I thought there was something we treasured then, because on any day in my university years that I would go either for a midweek service or a Sunday service, more often than not, we would either get an international speaker or a national leader. And therefore there's a way that really formed our thinking, our outlook, because of their experience, their maturity, their kind of education. That whole blend also impacted on the kind of Christianity that then sprouted out of the university. So I think that's one of the changes. The other change is now the age of the university student. Some years back, you would get most of the students to be in their 20s, early 20s when they're in the university. Today, now we are having teenagers at the university. And that has kind of changed because also the transitions that they are making, so a number of them probably are translating into the university of just after 2-3 months of a break from the high school. And depending on the context in which they came from, they tend to transfer that very quickly to the university. And that again also affects how the Christian Union expresses itself within the wider, would I say, the wider church. So I think that's another one. The second one is, the third one, in terms of the changes that have happened, is, and I'm not so sure whether this is, we've now had student ministries. When I was at the, during our year, say 20 years ago or more than 20 years ago, most of the national leaders seemed to have been raised up in the Christian Union. In fact, the Africa Leadership Study captures that the student ministry in this part of the world has played, I think, the highest percentage of the role, or the largest role in the production of future Christian evangelical leaders. However, I think in the last, say, 10 years, because also either the growth of the local church or a focus on the local church, now we have seen a bit of a higher transition from those who are serving in the student ministry joining the local church, and also those serving in the student ministry serving for a short time. I mean, shorter time than before. And I think then, in a sense, that also affects the kind of, how would I call it? The lack of a better word, thinking of how are we able to translate having the wisdom of those who have served for longer, staying on, and kind of continue feeding on into the student work. I think that also has affected the kind of influence and impact I think the student ministry would have, not only in terms of what is happening, but also on the wider culture of the church.
Okay, those are pretty solid reflections there.
Yeah.
But do you think that this shifting has affected, do we call it the quality of Christians that we have on campus or that CUs are producing? So that, and I've talked to people who say there's a lot of compromise now on campus. Mm-hmm. Students don't seem to take faith seriously. What would you say to that? The radicalness that was there with students in the past seems to be fizzling out.
Yeah, you can say that precisely. That indeed the quality of the student now coming out of the university, I think is now different from those who have been there longer to actually have experienced the kind of different kind of students who are now joining the society and the church at large. In terms of the radical expression of the university, Number one would be like, now think about it, there's like now the evangelistic teams that that began maybe in the late 80s and early 90s and really were vibrant in the 90s, had their primary goal in terms of evangelizing back to their own districts where they came from.
Yeah.
Now that has mutated a lot, because then these students would be quite vibrant and at the forefront of evangelism in the places where they have come from. Today, I think most of the events around that is a little bit more internal,
Yeah.
than it is for
Yeah.
the communities where they come from. It almost turns into a fellowship that is more to themselves, and finding another life that is not missional at the core. I think that's a major change, because the expression of a missional evangelistic team gives a student an opportunity, almost every student in the university an opportunity to serve at the forefront. Because it means that there are many, and so therefore everybody comes from a district. Everybody has a chance to be out there in the villages and evangelize with their own mother tongue. And I think that did something to us, because that means we graduated living thinking like that. I was trying to look at how the economic boom of 2003 to 2006 affected the Christian church. Because out of it, I think we had the proliferation of motivational speakers. Because then the economic success validated the motivational speaker. Before the economic boom, a motivational speaker would be an empty voice, because the economy was too bad. Even if they cite you,
You know it's not going to work.
it's not going to work. But I think our economic boom around 2003 going forward for the next, I think maybe 10 years, validated the motivational speaker. There were many more opportunities in terms of progress. The country opened up. That also meant the local church became wealthier. That's also what it meant. The local church became wealthier. By the local church becoming wealthier, it meant that then those who joined ministry, it became a serious pull in terms of pulling in. Also, that economic boom changed our message, because now people are having the opportunity to do better economically. The speaker on pulpit ended up talking about the money, and so the prosperity gospel kind of found an easy footing and relevance, because then it was possible to apply whatever message of prosperity was being brought. There was the economic enablement that any person who was not thinking deeply could almost connect how I'm experiencing economic prosperity with the message that was spoken on Sunday. If you get what I'm saying. Even though what was spoken on Sunday could not have been theologically and biblically sound, but the unsuspecting believer could connect the two. Because it is during that period of time that a lot of construction happened in this country. Many more people found a bit of more money in their pockets, and there are many unsuspecting believers who connected the prosperity gospel on the pulpit with what they were experiencing, and in a sense validated that. Then also the motivational speaking also went into high schools around the same period of time. So now we started raising a generation that was singly focused on material success. Remember that there are people now who are coming into the schools and displaying that success to the students. So we redefined what it means to be successful for our generation, and we lifted up icons that they could look up to see that, yes, we want you to be successful and be successful like Isa. And Isa would drive in with some material trappings that now we could connect that the message he's speaking, the suit he is wearing, the places he has traveled are indeed achievable. Now, what that did is that it actually made that whole entire deception thrive, because the environment was conducive for that kind of thing. Exactly. It meant that now whatever is spoken on the pulpit could actually be supported there. And then we also started training our younger children. So we walked away from other key fundamental aspects of discipleship, and this became a serious attraction. A number of pastors left what I would call ecclesiastical preaching, and they now became motivational speakers on hire. And I don't want to mention names. Now that shift had a serious impact on us as a generation. It therefore means that now we were fed on a certain message for such a long period of time that even when, say, COVID struck us, we were lost. We did not know how to go back and find our routing. So, in a sense, I think it's going to become quite a hard work. Going back, apologizing and saying, you know, what we told you 8 years ago was not the entire biblical truth. And I think maybe the older generation, we need to apologize to some people who have grown up in the schools, especially in the schools where I have spent my adult years. Almost every speaker on a Sunday service would turn that pulpit opportunity to a motivational speaking opportunity, and that damaged the minds of those students that now then later on came to the university with that understanding of success. Then the universities opened up. Again, they became too many. So we had again almost everybody wanting to join. You remember when we had a period of time when all the students... So there were so many factors at play that made this message palatable and almost believable. And I do pray that the Lord will grant us the courage to confront the mistakes we have done. I remember I was almost a lone voice going to schools, trying to bring back the proclamation of the gospel amongst other student ministries, say like KSEF. There was indeed a cry from a number of the student ministry, because again, speakers that go to high schools are not always from the student ministries. You would get a lot of community people and the local church people who are actually now, I would say, almost marinating in this kind of environment, and the message now that we're taking to the students in the schools. And I think, and I'm convinced that has had its own serious impact in the generation of students who have left the university in the last, say, maybe 5 to 7 years. Yeah.
We were in high school at a time when motivational speakers were
the thing.
We needed to have one every semester.
Every school term. Yeah.
Win and I went to the same high school, you remember?
Oh, you did?
The Fellowship of Christian Unions, reaching students, changing nations.